So we'll get started with Section 7, TBEST reports and maps for planning and TDPs. Okay, so TBEST provides powerful tools for planners to analyze socioeconomic, ridership, and transit operational trends for their transit system and service area. So that includes several tools that we're going to cover today. Scenario Summary is a comprehensive comparative analysis tool, and at the route level and system level, for multiple data analysis, including ridership and performance, socioeconomic markets, cost, etc. So that'll be our first module that we cover today. And interactive reporting is where you would interact with selections from your transit network and use those as input to your reporting, both tabular reporting and map reporting. You also have a socioeconomic market summary we'll look at, land use market summary. We'll look at the TDP reports. So we do have reports that are specific for the TDP. And these are reports that if you don't do anything else, this is what FDOT would like to see in your transit development plans, or because it contains particular goals that you might have for your transit system and how your individual scenarios compare with the base. And we're also going to go over Title VI reporting, which there are extensive tools in TBEST for Title VI. And what's great about all of these tools, they're both visual, map-based, interactive, and exportable. So you can export to Excel, shapefile, geodatabase, KMZ, PNG, and even some pre-filled PowerPoint templates. Okay, so how does this data relate to the TDP requirements as specified in the TDP handbook? And so we're going to be looking at the TDP, the existing performance evaluation, transit demand assessment, ridership estimations, needs plan, developing alternatives in the 10-year transit plan, all those sections 3.2, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8 in the scenario summary. For the interactive reporting, we'll look at existing performance evaluation, route service maps, and performance evaluation in 3.2. The SE market summary for situational appraisal, land use, a lot of the same, but look at land use patterns, major employers, situational and transit-friendly land use and urban design efforts, transit needs assessment. So all of those can be fulfilled with the land use market summary. The TDP reports, situational appraisal, transit demand estimation, goals and objectives, and 10-year transit plan. And then Title VI, we'll be looking more at traditional markets. You know, what markets do you have that are dependent on transit? And so that's something that the Title VI reports do tend to provide. Now, in relation to operations and planning assessment, these tools do provide additional value. So scenario summary, compare existing route changes to service costs required, service estimation and efficiency. For the interactive reporting, the demand projections, the headways, speed reporting, stop level analysis, route type analysis, estimated or observed ridership. Market analysis, obviously market assessment, density thresholds, transit orientation indices, and then Title VI, minority route planning, equity service requirements, and operational metric reports is our query tool, where we do bus stop spacing and consolidation in software. And there are other tools that we'll use here, such as bus stop balancing tool, which helps identify stops that may need to be removed based on low performance or stop spacing, etc. Okay, so let's get into the scenario summary tool. And so just as an overview, the TBEST scenario summary tool is available via the TBEST Explorer, just via a right click on a scenario. And it's used for comparative analysis between two different scenarios that you specify. You can filter the report by route type and time period. You can create not only a report, but a chart. You can export to Excel, and we'll provide some TDP examples of the exported data. Okay, so Basically, this report is to compare on a route level and then a system level or a subtotal kind of level, the route and system uh, performance in terms of direct and transfer boardings that the TBEST model estimates, so that you can compare again from a base year, your base year model, or another scenario. It doesn't have to be the base scenario. It can be like we're going to do the fall 2021 comparison against the 2030 TDP scenarios for our TDP analysis. So what we want to do is determine the deltas for a lot of the different conditions and variables that are within TBEST. And so if you look at this report that's up here as an example, the first column in the report is just the route name, and then the second column states the additional boardings that were either plus or minus for that particular route that the model projected. So this is where the model comes into play to actually estimate ridership both for scenario A, which in this example is from a different, not the Gatorbill site, but May 2018 and then TDP 2028 to determine what differentials you have in terms for ridership at the route level. Now you can also see that it has, and I'll just annotate this a little bit so you can see it a little better. So this is the total boardings, and what you see here is A and B, columns A and B. A relates to scenario A, and B relates to scenario B. So these are the values for Route 1. It predicted 2,109 for May 2018, and then 10 years later, 2,386 for a percent change of 13.1% for that route in terms of total boardings. So it has that for every route, as you can see, and it also has that for all the variables that you have in this list. Now, you can drill into a lot of these variables, and we'll take a look at that in a little while, but by default, some of the key indicators come out, such as, was there a total population change? Was there a total employment change? Did the service change? In this case, the stop visits. That is a count of the times that a vehicle arrives at a stop on the route. So it's both a measure of coverage and of service. So I really like this indicator as a key component of service change, because you get both the service change, and if you're adding stops or removing stops, that also comes into play with this as well. So I really like this as a key indicator in terms of service change. So this should be something you look at in depth, but there are a lot of other variables related to service, service miles, service hours, et cetera, that you can also look at. But what ends up happening with this is it ends up telling a story of your scenario, because you can look at all these variables together, and you can look at what happened with your ridership. Did it go up or down? And then you look at the service level. Did they go up or down? Did the total population go up or down? So what you want to see is, does this make sense to me, right? So it's a way of looking at the data and saying, does the ridership model, what it's projecting, make sense? And if it doesn't, why not? Did I make an error? Or is there something unique in this route that TBEST isn't picking out? Do I need to make an adjustment with my data to make it find the information that it needs? Does it need a special generator? Things like that, right? So you can kind of see what you might need to do to improve it, or if it's good to go the way that it is. So as much as anything else, this is a great diagnostic tool for you to review your model results in comparison with the base or any other scenario, and see what your deltas are for all your variables. And at the bottom, you have the total for all of your routes that are in the report. Now, that could be all routes, or it could be a subset of routes that you select, either individually select the routes to put into this report, or filter by route type and mode, etc. So anyway, it's a great comparison report. You can also do this report just with one scenario. So you don't have to do two. You can do this report with one. So we'll see what that looks like too. But you also see that you can chart this data as well. So this example is showing the routes on the bottom. And I guess this is total boardings, right? So it's showing total boardings that are projected for each one of the routes. So we'll look at this in a little more in depth. So this is how you set up the reporting. This is the TBEST scenario summary dialog that will help you select the inputs that you can generate the report. So basically, you will start with scenario A. Generally, that will be your base scenario, or in our case, it will be the fall of 2021. And then you look at the 2030 TDP, probably, or the no build to see what the changes are. And you have to, if you click this compare button, that's when this second scenario B becomes enabled. And you can do the comparison. You can do the comparison on weekday, Saturday, Sunday, any of the peak periods. You can do it, this summary on. You can annualize this report, and there are other, like a weekly report, etc., that might come out of this. And below here, you have your report filters. So this is where you can report on a bus route type and mode. So you can exclude modes from it. You can add modes to it. So you can do some unique filtering for the reporting here, or you can define a route subset individually, select routes to put into this report. Okay, so this is a report that you can see where we've expanded all of the variables that are actually in this report. Now, not all of them are visible. So whenever you check one, it will become visible in the report. So, so what you see here are the additional boardings, which I mentioned, total boardings, population, employment, outbound transfers, boarding per service hour, mile per trip, and the route cost over here. What you also see down at the bottom is we have a section for new routes. So, so basically what this report does, it will section off new routes and removed routes so that there is no real direct comparison necessarily for these, because they're either weren't in the base or they aren't in the new scenario. So they're sectioned off, but their totals are still at the bottom for you to see. So so it's a great way to see what new routes are in, what routes have been removed as well. You can see the categories are boardings, population, household income, employment, network, service, performance, and cost. This is another example of the chart where you can do some interesting analysis and use the interface here to select particular routes that you might want to review, and then the variables that you want to go into the review. And you can change how the chart looks by using the chart properties up here. This edit chart button will allow you to edit the properties and show different chart types, colors, schemes, etc., to be able to better review your data. And of course, the data that's in the report can be exported to Excel, where you can do a lot of interesting things with it, including put this into your TDP so that you have a route level summary of your TDP comparison for your base versus your preferred TDP 10-year scenario. So here are some examples of that from different agencies. So I think the first one is from JTA. And so you have your average daily ridership forecast, weekday, Saturday, and Sunday by route name and route number. So this would be something that you can derive from TBEST and put directly into your TDP. Again, this would also be something, population, employment, and ridership for your base year, your future year, and then a difference. So all of this is TBEST derived. And this is RTS annualized. So there is basically the same as what we have in TBEST, annualized boardings at the route level for 2019 and 2029, and then the absolute change and the percent change here. So this is all, again, TBEST derived. This is another example from Lynx, I believe, where they're showing ridership for weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. That would be something TBEST would derive, and then the trend or the percent change, and the route design guidelines, the bus stop spacing guidelines, stops per mile, also something that TBEST can derive for the any scenario or any network that you have in. So again, we have that guideline for route investigation based on passengers per hour and guideline for route investigation based on passengers per vehicle mile. So again, these are also something that TBEST can derive, and you can see what they've done in this report is the red would be falling under their metrics and green would be high performing versus low performing. So that's also something that you could do inside of a spreadsheet with some of the TBEST data. Okay, so we'll take any questions and then we'll go to an exercise on that.
I don't think there are any questions in the chat, but if anyone wants to speak up or let us know, I think this today is a little bit more free flowing, so we do have time for people to share their thoughts.
Okay, so you should have the scenario summary tool exercise in front of you. So let's use that and start to do some reporting with it. So I have my Gatorville 2021 transit system. Others may have the day 2, which is totally fine. They're exactly the same thing. So if I refer to Gatorville and you have Gatorville day 2, they're the same thing. All right, so let's drill into our scenarios. And we want to start at the fall 2021 because that's essentially our our base comparison scenario or network, because that's our current network and we want to compare that with really the 2023 TDP. So if we right click on the fall 2021 and we go to scenario summary tool. And if we click the compare, we can then select from the remaining scenarios, and we want to select the TDP 2030. And we will keep all of the default summary spans and time periods for now. We can come back and regenerate these reports with lots of different output. For now, we will use the defaults. We can drill in here to show these are the actual route types that are in TBEST at this point in this network. There is not a rail mode in there, so that's fine. So you could also filter this report to just show matching routes, new routes, or removed routes. So rather than having to identify these yourselves, TBEST will identify those and just place those into the report. Right, but for right now, we're going to grab all of them. You could also do a define route subset, and this is where you would individually select routes to put into the report. But for now, we're going to show all routes, and we're just going to hit the show report option. Okay. So for our Gatorville system, where scenario A is fall 2021, scenario B is TDP 2030, we're looking at, for each route, the additional boardings that were projected for each route in the system. And if we scroll to the bottom, we can see that we have our new route, which is our Route 88, which we implemented yesterday as part of the TDP 2030 scenario. So what you see is that there is an NA in the column A for total boardings and for all of column A for this particular route because it didn't exist in the fall 2021 scenario. And what you see is that TBEST predicted that there would be 325 weekday riders for Route 88, and our total weekday boardings, additional boardings, is 1,624. And we have a percent increase of 11.8% over the base fall of 2021 So we've gained 11.8% in terms of boardings for the system. Now, does that tell the entire story about, yeah, okay, great, we have 11.8% growth. That's super. But we also have 8.7% growth in population at the system level, and we have 11% growth in total employment. So those kind of match up with the growth in total boardings. That's kind of, we only made one change. So this is a pretty simplified version of a TDP. You probably are going to have a lot more route changes than that. So, so what this helps you do is see, what are the route changes? Where is the change in service? Because if you look at the stop visits, none of the stop visits have changed. We have not changed the service on any of the other routes. So we have a very simplified, assessment here where we're not doing a lot of changes. But in reality, whenever you get to do this yourself, you will have a lot more changes to look at. And what this helps you do is take a look at those and see where are you going up, where are you going down, and help identify, what is happening with the system as best you can. So if we expand out and we look at some additional variables that we have here, we have headways, we have the estimated vehicles, we have the stop visits, service span in hours, round trip travel times, revenue service trips in miles and hours, and boardings per service hour, mile, and trip, along with the route cost. So all of those are very important variables, and if you do an export of your Excel or to Excel, it will take this out. So in our instructions for our exercise, it asks the question, when the scenario report opens, evaluate the route, system ridership, SE data, service, performance, cost comparison for new Route 88. What are the values below? The total boardings we saw to be 325 is the projected weekday boarding. So that's good, but it's also asking, okay, what about transfer boardings? So to be able to see the transfer boardings, you have to do, you have to check it, right? So if you check it, then it adds it to the table in the report, and we'll just add direct boardings while we're at it. So we have direct, transfer, and total boardings here. And so the number of transfer boardings is 59 for our new route, and our direct boardings is 266. Okay, so the next question is route median household income. So we need to go to our income and turn the median household income on. Where are we here? Sorry, I missed it right there. So 61,178. And what's interesting is if you compare it to the system for all the routes, it's at 42,000. So this particular route is well above in terms of income. So just so you know, that one is interesting. And let's see here, revenue service trips and revenue service miles, those are pretty easy to get. We have our trips and miles here, so 84 and 860.1. So boardings per service hour and per service trip, what are those? So here's our hours of boardings per service hour, boardings per service trip. So if we look down in this column, it's 3.9, and the average is 5.1. And boardings per service hour is 4.8, and the average is 11.3 for the system. So this one is a little lower performing than other routes, and so that could be density of stops, speeds, anything can kind of play into that, but it is a little bit less in terms of performance. And in terms of a route cost, for our new route, it's 5,857 per weekday to operate this route. All right, so we also have the ability to open a chart. So that is this button at the top, open chart. And essentially it has really kind of the same interface, except in this, we can interactively select the routes that we want to include in the chart. And by default, all of the routes are here. and it'll show total boardings for both scenario A and scenario B. So if we can maximize this, we can see that Route 20 has, some growth. They all should show pretty much an increase. Some may or may not, but most should show an increase. You see here is our Route 88, where we have our scenario B total boardings in gray and scenario A in blue. We don't have anything for scenario A. We just have the scenario B. So therefore, there's just one column for the Route 88. So again, you can do this interactively. So I can select all, check that off, and then uncheck it, and that will take off all my routes. And then if I select Route 1, Route 2, Route 3, Route 4, Route 5, and 6, you can kind of interact with it in that way. You can also take off total boardings, and you can say, I want to see population variables. So here are the population variables within this scenario, this comparative analysis. And if I just want to see, individual ones, I don't want to see all of them. This, uncheck them, and I'll just show total population. Now, if I want to see some other like poverty population, then, here's where I have the deltas for the routes that I have selected. So as you can see, this is very interactive. Once you have created the chart that you want, you can do the save chart as an image, and that will bring it out to an image file, that JPEG or PNG, that you can just place into your TDP or whatever document that you're using. You also have the ability to edit the contents of the chart. So you can show a data table here. So these are the actual values, some of them that are going in for particular values, right? So here's our population and poverty for both scenario A and scenario B. So these are the values, which some people like to see this as well. And if you want to show the, the grid lines, maybe want to take those off, or, show visible, apply. Here's their major grid lines. You can change the header, but I think the chart area and the plot and let's see here, appearance, gallery. So this is something that you can do as well if you want to do a line or scatter and a bar, something like this, and hit apply. So then you have something a little bit different. You can do a pie chart, apply. So there's some pie charts, right? So it's pretty interactive, and it's really nice to kind of play around with this with the data that you have in tow for your comparison scenario. So if you want to dig in and supply some data and charting, then this is a great interactive way to do that and put this into your documentation, whether it's TDP or COA. Okay, so we can close that. All right, so we can also open this as in Excel, and I just want to do that to show this is our, TDP 2030 comparison. You notice that it automatically goes to your Gatorville reports folder so that it will show up in your interface. Then it will also be packaged with your data. If you export this to a distribution file, then this report will go with it. Okay, so when you open it, again, I think one of the items here that's nice to have are borders, right? It has some of the color schemes and all of that, but it just doesn't have the borders. So what I like to do is just add borders to all of this and use Excel to do that. If I can. And use my borders to place all borders. So now that looks like a kind of a typical report where we have borders in it. And this is something that where you can start to carve this information out that you have from Excel and put this into some of the report examples that we were looking at from the TDPs. So if we go back to our slides and some of these, So it would be fairly easy for us to kind of reformat this information for these formats and color schemes, etc. You would have to do a little more work to get this kind of information out of it, where you're looking at your metrics and starting to guide, which routes are underperforming and which ones are overperforming and which ones are kind of in the middle. So that's something you would have to do in Excel with some formulas to make that work, but that's not too difficult. Okay, so this is great. So I will save this, and whenever you save it, of course, if I close this, I'll come back to it in a minute. I should have my comparison report right here. So if I double click on it here, it should be exactly what I just saved, right? So once you save it in Excel, it's still listed here. You can always come back to it. All right, so I'm going to set this up again. I'm going to go to my scenario summary tool and compare fall 2021 to my TDP 2030. This time I want to annualize it. Actually, this drop down is the annual option. So it grays out the time period because it's going to take into account all time periods. So instead of showing the daily numbers, now we're going to show the annualized numbers for this report. So that's pretty handy to have. Again, that you are, showing this information from an annual perspective as well. So I will let you know too that the totals at the bottom for the population and employment variables and household variables at the route level, these are calculated when you do the model runs, right? So this is a model run calculated value. And this also is at the bottom. And what this is a non-double counted value. So for our total population of 102,408, you can see that obviously is not the sum of all of these routes. It's going to be way higher if you were to sum them. But what we want to do is show that this is not a double count, or this is not a double count. It is the unique area for all of your walk sheds for all of your routes, and it does not double count for overlapping routes. So that's kind of a nice thing to have, is that your market is assessed in total at this level. Same for employment and all of your other socioeconomic variables. Okay, so that is the annualized report that you can generate. You can also, as I mentioned, you can do, subsets. So if you filter routes on a subset, maybe I want 1, 2, 3 in my new 88 in a report. So here's my 1, 2, 3 and my new 88 in a new report. Okay, and what else do we have? You need to do a AM peak or a Saturday or a Sunday. If we do Saturday. So here is the Saturday totals, and what you see is that you have a lot more zeros in your report, and where there is no service on all of these routes. So it's also a good way of saying which routes are in service and which are not, Saturday or weekday or Sunday. Okay, Matt, any other items here that I might be missing, or?
A few people messaged and said maybe we were going too quickly. I was wondering if anyone had something that you want Rodney to review or look into further. We have time, so please let us know. And I actually allowed people to unmute themselves now, so if anyone
that's good.
Wants to speak up, just feel free.
Okay, and I mentioned also that you don't have to use a comparison. It can just be a single scenario that you summarize. So if I just do fall 2021 and I do show report, then the report will not be a comparison report. It will just be for fall 2021. So you have all the variables that we had before. It's just there isn't a comparison between the other scenario. And also, we didn't we just compared the TDP 2030. We did not do the no build. So if we show the no build here, then this is our differences. And in this, we should see no service change at all. So our stop visits have not changed. They're exactly the same between the two scenarios. But we do have an additional ridership because our population and employment did grow. And that was based on, if you remember from yesterday, the TAZ growth rates. So did I see a comment there? I don't see my chat here, so.
Rodney, I think you just, when we're going through the exercises, I think the stream is blurry for some people, perhaps. So when you're selecting things, maybe you could perhaps say the name of the thing you're selecting, just read it out. So even people listening through audio could follow along. So,
okay. All right, I didn't realize that. Yeah, sure. I'll try to be as forthright as I can when I'm doing this. So, yes, this was a non-comparison report, and so, well, actually, this one is a comparison. This is with the no build. So, so we see the changes based on our growth rates for socioeconomic data, but no service change. That's
and Adam has a great question. He wants to know if you can compare 3 scenarios.
You can, but not in this particular tool. When we get to the TDP tool, TDP report, you are able to see 3 of them together, but only at the highest level. So yeah, so if you wanted to do 3 for this, you probably would have to do something in Excel where you piece them together in Excel. But for at the route level and at this detail, we're not doing 3 at this point. I think it would be a kind of too much in a way. It would be hard to do a apples to apples comparison when you're doing 3 scenarios.
You need 3 columns for each percent change. But it is possible, Adam. I've definitely done that before.
So I saw that question, is there a way to bulk increase my chat here? Sorry, I want to get this right when I say bulk increase the operational costs due to annual inflation. Yes, you can. So if you're doing the TDP 2030, and if you open the scenario, and we use our calculator, and I don't know that it's a percent increase necessarily, but it would be something that would be a value that you would derive. So if there, let's say that you're implementing a cost change on all of the routes, and you would just select them all and use your update route operation settings. And then you would change the service mile cost here so that it would be, $8 or whatever that inflationary number is that you want to put in. You would just put it in here and hit update. And then you may have to run the model again after that. So I'll try it and just see, and I can always rerun it. But I'll put this in as $8.81 per mile and update it and close it and save it. And let's see if no, we're still good. So let's see here. If we rerun our 2030 scenario summary and compare it, and for the weekday, let's see what happens if we change it. So the cost does go up by 30% in all these cases for that. So basically, that's the kind of the percent change that we updated. So you have a 29.4% change. And you could do that for specific routes if you thought that some routes were going, I mean, generally you wouldn't, I guess, in most cases, but if you're doing an inflationary where everything's going up, then this makes sense. But if you're doing on a route by route basis, you can do that as well. Hopefully that answered your question, Miguel. Okay. So any other questions related to that? We can always come back to it. And if you have questions, we are going to move through several other reporting modules. So, we have plenty of time to do it.